The first time my son put his hands on me, I was standing in my own kitchen making Sunday breakfast. I heard Tamika before I saw her, those expensive heels clicking across my tile floor like gunshots. "Where is he?" she demanded, and I knew we were past the point of good mornings. Darnell came in behind her, wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. His jaw tight with that look he'd been giving me since he married her 3 years ago. The look that said I was supposed to be grateful they even showed up to my house anymore. "Dad, we need to talk about the loan," he said, not even sitting down at the table where I'd raised him on stories about his grandfather working the docks in Baltimore. "Already told you no, son," I said, flipping the bacon. "That restaurant idea ain't sound. You don't know nothing about running a business." That's when Tamika's voice went sharp. "You're sitting on a pension and Social Security, and you can't help your own child, after everything Darnell's done for you." I turned to face them, 68 years old, and still solid in my shoulders from the warehouse work I pretended to do for 30 years. What exactly has Darnell done for me? My son's hand shot out and grabbed my collar. Then his palm connected with my chest, shoving me back against the counter. The coffee mug I'd been about to fill shattered on the floor. Tamika grabbed my arm, her nails digging in, screaming about how I was a selfish old man who didn't understand what it took to maintain their lifestyle. Darnell's face was inches from mine, telling me I was going to give them that $50,000 or they'd stop bringing my grandson around. I looked into my boy's eyes and saw a stranger. The next morning I served him breakfast and justice, but that comes later in this story. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. Let me take you back to where this all started, about 2 years before that Sunday morning. My name is Cornelius Washington, but folks call me Neil. I retired from what everyone thought was a warehouse supervisor position at age 66. Had a nice little pension, my house paid off in a quiet neighborhood in Atlanta, and my late wife Dolores's life insurance keeping me comfortable. That's what people saw. That's what my son saw. What they didn't know was that I owned the warehouse, and the distribution center, and the trucking company that serviced half of Georgia, built it from nothing over 40 years, kept my name off the public records, let other folks be the face while I stayed in the background, wore the same work boots, drove the same Ford pickup, kept my business to myself. Dolores knew, God rest her soul. She understood why I did it, wanted our boy to work for what he got, not coast on Daddy's money. Darnell was a good kid growing up, made decent grades, played basketball, went to Morehouse College on a partial scholarship. We were proud, his mama and me. Sat in the front row at graduation, took him to Pascal's afterward for fried chicken, and celebrated like he'd just won the championship. He got a job at a marketing firm, started making good money. That's when he met Tamika. She came from money. Her daddy was a doctor. Her mama ran some consulting business. They lived in one of those gated communities in Buckhead, the kind where the lawns look like golf courses. Tamika was pretty, I'll give her that, and educated too. Had her MBA, talked about brands and networking and building wealth. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at our neighborhood, at my truck, at the simple life we lived. Like she was doing charity work. At their wedding, Tamika's mama asked me what I planned to give them as a wedding gift. I said I was paying for half the catering and giving them $5,000. She smiled like I'd told a joke and said, "How quaint." After Dolores passed 2 years ago, things changed. Darnell started coming around less. When he did visit, Tamika would stay in the car, texting on her phone. My grandson, DeAndre, who was 4 years old then, would run up and hug my legs, but she'd call him back before he got too comfortable. "We can't stay long, baby. Grandmother's house isn't really set up for children." My house was the same one Darnell grew up in. Wasn't nothing wrong with it. The money requests started small. Darnell needed help with their car payment because Tamika's Lexus had broken down. $500. I gave it. Then it was $1,000 for DeAndre's private school tuition shortfall. I gave that to her, total to. Then $2,000 for furniture because they were hosting Tamika's parents and wanted to make a good impression. Each time, Darnell would promise to pay me back. Never did. I didn't care about the money. What bothered me was the way he asked. No more, "Hey, Pops, I know you're on a fixed income. I hate to ask. Just, Dad, I need money. Can you send it today?" At Sunday dinner at my house, back when they still came, Tamika would look at my furniture like it had diseases. "Cornelius, you really should upgrade. This couch has to be from the 90s. It was from 89. Dolores picked it out. Wasn't nothing wrong with it. "I'm comfortable," I'd say, "but you're not living, not really. Don't you want to enjoy your retirement? Travel? Buy nice things?" She'd wave her hand around my living room, where photos of Darnell's childhood covered the walls. "You could get so much for this house, move into a nice senior community with activities." Darnell would just sit there, nodding along, eating the collard greens and cornbread I'd spent hours making. My son, who used to defend me when kids at school talked about my beat-up truck. My son, who cried at his mother's funeral and told me I was the strongest man he knew. The big loan request came on a Tuesday evening. Darnell showed up alone, which was unusual. Sat across from me in my living room, put on his serious face. "Dad, I need to talk to you about an investment opportunity." He laid out this whole plan about opening a restaurant with Tamika's cousin. Upscale soul food, he called it. They had a location picked out, a concept, even a name. They just needed $50,000 to get started. They'd already put in 20 themselves, had investors lined up for another 100, but they needed this last piece to close the deal. "Why not get a business loan?" I asked. "Banks want too much documentation, too many questions. This is family money, Dad. An investment in our future, in DeAndre's future." I looked at my son, this man who'd never run so much as a lemonade stand, who'd never worked a day in food service, who spent money like it grew on trees. "Son, I don't have $50,000 to give you." His face changed. "Yes, you do. You've got Mama's life insurance. You've got savings. You barely spend anything. What I have, I need for my own future. Medical bills, emergencies. I'm 68 years old, Darnell. You're healthy as a horse, and when you do need help, we'll be there. But right now, we need you to be there for us." He leaned forward. "This is my shot, Dad. Our shot. Don't you want to see your son succeed?" "I do. But not like this. You need to build something yourself, not on my back." That's when his voice went cold. "On your back? You live in a house that's worth maybe $200,000 in this neighborhood. You drive a truck from 2005. You eat the same meals every week. What exactly are you doing with all your money?" "That's my business. It's family business. Mama would have wanted you to help me." The thing about grief is that people use it as a weapon. Bringing up Dolores like that, like she'd be disappointed in me for not funding their half-baked dream, that cut deep. But I kept my face steady. "Your mama would want you to work for what you got, same as we did." Darnell left angry that night. Didn't even say goodbye. 3 days later, Tamika started calling my phone. Left voicemails about how I was letting my pride get in the way of my son's happiness, how I was going to regret this, how they were family, and family helped each other. When I didn't return her calls, she showed up at my house on Saturday morning with Darnell in the car. I told them through the door I wasn't changing my mind. That's when things got mean. Tamika posted on Facebook about how some parents hold their children back instead of lifting them up, how success threatens small-minded people, how poverty mentality gets passed down through generations. Didn't mention me by name, but everybody knew. My phone started ringing with cousins and church members asking what was going on. Darnell stopped answering my calls. When I tried to visit, Tamika would answer the door and say they were busy. I didn't see my grandson for 2 months. Then came that Sunday morning. They showed up at 7:30, both of them dressed like they were going to brunch at some fancy place. I'd just gotten home from early service at New Hope Baptist, still had my Bible on the counter, was going to make breakfast, maybe watch some football, call Jerome from the warehouse to talk about the game. Instead, I got my son's hands on me and his wife's screaming in my face, and I made a decision. Same kind of decision I made 40 years ago when I realized working for someone else was going to keep me at the bottom forever. Same kind of decision I made when I bought my first truck and started contracting independently. Same kind of decision I made when I hired my first driver and started building something real. I was going to teach my son what I should have taught him years ago. After they left, after I cleaned up the broken coffee mug and the bacon I'd burned in the commotion, I sat at my kitchen table and made a phone call. "Veronica, it's Neil Washington. I need you to set up a meeting. All the division heads, the legal team, and accounting. Monday morning, 8 a.m. My lawyer's voice went professional. "What's the agenda?" "We're about to make some changes to company policy, starting with employee background checks and contractor audits, real thorough ones." See, what Darnell didn't know was that his marketing firm had a contract with one of my subsidiary companies, had for 2 years. And what Tamika didn't know was that her consulting business had been billing my distribution center for services that were mostly air and paperwork. Both of them had built their fancy lifestyle partly on my money without ever knowing it. Monday morning, I walked into my real office for the first time in front of people who thought I was just Neil from the warehouse. Wore a suit I'd bought years ago but never wore, carried a briefcase that Dolores gave me, let my attorney introduce me as the owner and CEO of Washington Logistics Group. The looks on those faces were worth everything. "Gentlemen, ladies," I said, taking my seat at the head of the conference table, "we're going to talk about accountability, and then we're going to talk about what happens when family bites the hand that feeds them." By Wednesday afternoon, Darnell's firm had lost their biggest contract. By Friday, Tamika's invoices were being audited by the IRS because it turns out billing for consulting services you never actually provided is called fraud. By the following Monday, my grandson's private school received an anonymous donation to cover his tuition for the year, with a request that if his parents couldn't pay, he should stay enrolled, and I was just getting started. Darnell's marketing firm laid him off 2 weeks after I pulled the contract. They gave him the speech about restructuring and budget cuts, but I knew the truth. Without that account, his department wasn't profitable anymore. They kept 3 people and let 6 go. My son was one of them. He called me on a Thursday afternoon. First time I'd heard his voice in 3 weeks. "Dad, did you do this?" I was in my real office, the one on the 15th floor overlooking downtown Atlanta, reviewing quarterly reports. Through my window, I could see people smaller than ants rushing around, building their lives, trying to survive. "Do what, son?" "My job. They cut the Winston Logistics account, and then they cut me. Winston Logistics is part of your company, isn't it?" I looked it up. Washington Logistics Group owns 12 subsidiaries. Winston is one of them. "Sounds like you've been doing your homework." "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why would you do this to me?" I leaned back in my chair, the same chair I'd sat in for 30 years while my son thought I was pushing boxes in a warehouse. "You put your hands on me, Darnell. You and your wife came into my house, the house where I raised you, and you assaulted me over money. What did you think was going to happen?" "I didn't. We didn't assault you. You pushed me. She grabbed me. You all screamed in my face and broke my property. That's assault, son. Could have called the police right then. Could have pressed charges. Instead, I decided to teach you a different kind of lesson." The line went quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're really him? You own all of that? Built it from nothing. While you were in diapers, I was driving trucks 16 hours a day. While you were in high school, I was buying my second distribution center. While you were at Morehouse, I was expanding into 3 more states. Your mama and I decided to keep it quiet. Let you make your own way. By lying to me. By pretending to be poor. I never pretended to be poor. I just didn't pretend to be rich. There's a difference. And you never asked, never cared to know. Just saw an old man in work boots and decided that's all I was. I need that job, Dad. Tamika and I, we've got bills. The house payment, the cars, DeAndre's school. DeAndre's school is paid for. Anonymous donor. He'll be fine. Who's going to pay for everything else? I imagine you'll figure it out. Same way I did when I was your age, with a new baby and a wife to support. Got a job, worked hard, lived within my means. He hung up on me. At church that Sunday, Sister Beatrice pulled me aside after service. She was one of those church mothers who'd known me since I was Darnell's age, had watched me grow up, watched me build my business, watched Dolores's funeral with tears streaming down her face. Brother Cornelius, I heard about the trouble with your boy. News travels fast. Always does, especially when it's family. She squeezed my hand. Are you doing the right thing? That question sat heavy on my chest. I'm doing what needs to be done. That ain't the same thing, and you know it. She looked at me with those wise eyes. Pride goeth before destruction, Neil. Make sure you know which pride you're fighting. I thought about that conversation for days. Wondered if maybe I was taking things too far, letting my anger drive me instead of my wisdom. Then I got a call from my attorney. Neil, we've got a problem. Tamika Washington filed a restraining order against you, claims you've been harassing her business and threatening her family. Judge granted a temporary order pending a hearing. I almost laughed. I haven't spoken to her since that Sunday. Doesn't matter. She's got text messages from Darnell saying you admitted to getting him fired. She's spinning this as an elderly man having some kind of mental health crisis, using his company to abuse family members. That's ridiculous. That's strategy. She's trying to get ahead of the narrative. If she can paint you as unstable, anything you do looks like the actions of a vindictive old man, not a business owner protecting his interests. The hearing was set for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, I couldn't go within 500 feet of Tamika, which meant I couldn't go to their house, which meant I couldn't see my grandson. That hurt worse than anything else. Jerome stopped by my house that evening. He'd worked for me for 25 years, started as a driver, and worked his way up to operations manager. One of the few people outside of Dolores who knew the whole truth about who I was. Boss, you sure you want to keep pushing this? Your boy's already lost his job. Tamika's business is under investigation. Maybe it's time to ease up. We were sitting on my back porch, drinking sweet tea like we'd done 100 times before. They put their hands on me, Jerome. In my own house. I know, and they were wrong, dead wrong. But you're about to lose your grandson over this. Is that worth it? I didn't have an answer for that. The restraining order hearing came on a Tuesday morning. I wore my best suit, brought my attorney, had my evidence ready. Tamika showed up in a conservative dress, looking like someone's innocent daughter instead of the woman who'd helped assault me. Darnell sat beside her, wearing a cheap suit I'd never seen before, looking tired and angry. The judge was a black woman named Hathaway, maybe 50 years old, with no patience for nonsense. She listened to Tamika's attorney talk about how I was using my wealth and power to destroy her family, how I'd admitted to getting Darnell fired, how I was retaliating against them for a simple family disagreement. Then my attorney presented the facts, the coffee mug I'd saved from that Sunday, still broken, with the date documented. Photos of the bruises on my chest and arm. Text messages from Tamika demanding money. The contract cancellation that was based purely on performance issues, documented over 6 months before the incident. The IRS audit that started because of legitimate billing irregularities. Judge Hathaway looked at Tamika. Mrs. Washington, did you and your husband physically confront Mr. Washington in his home on the date in question? We had a disagreement, family tensions, but nothing that warranted this level of retaliation. That's not what I asked. Did you put your hands on him? Tamika's lawyer whispered something to her. She straightened up. It was a stressful situation. Things got heated. But he's using his company to punish us for a family matter. That's abuse of power. The judge looked at me. Mr. Washington, did you use your position to retaliate against your son and daughter-in-law? Your Honor, I made business decisions based on business reasons. My son's firm lost a contract because they weren't performing. My daughter-in-law's consulting business is being audited because the invoices didn't match the services provided. I didn't create those problems. I just stopped ignoring them. But the timing is suspicious. The timing is when I decided to stop letting family loyalty blind me to bad business practices. Judge Hathaway studied both sides for a long moment. Then she dissolved the restraining order, but gave us all a warning. This is family business disguised as legal business. Mr. Washington, you're within your rights as a business owner, but I suggest you examine your motives. Mrs. Washington, if you put your hands on this man again, you'll face criminal charges. Both of you need to figure out if destroying each other is worth losing everything else. We left the courtroom on opposite sides of the hallway. Darnell caught my eye for just a second, and I saw something there. Not anger. Fear. He was scared, and that should have made me feel victorious. Instead, it just made me feel old. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about DeAndre, about how he was growing up, watching his parents and grandfather tear each other apart. Kept hearing Sister Beatrice asking if I was doing the right thing. Kept seeing Judge Hathaway's expression when she talked about destroying each other. Around 2 in the morning, I decided I'd call Darnell in the morning, set up a meeting. Maybe we could find some middle ground, some way to rebuild what we'd broken. I'd make him work for it, make him understand what he'd done wrong. But maybe there was a path forward that didn't end with my family in pieces. I never got to make that call. At 6:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. Cornelius Washington, you need to come with us. What's this about? Your son, Darnell Washington, was involved in an incident last night. He's at Grady Hospital. He was found in his car, unconscious, with a head injury and your address written on a piece of paper in his hand. He was carrying a gun. My blood went cold. Is he alive? He's in critical condition. The gun was loaded. We need to ask you some questions about your relationship with your son, and whether you felt threatened by him. As they drove me to the hospital, one thought kept running through my mind. What had I done? I'd pushed my son so hard that he'd gotten desperate enough to come to my house with a loaded weapon. Whether he was planning to threaten me, or worse, it didn't matter. I'd created this situation. I'd turned my own child into this person. At the hospital, Tamika was in the waiting room, her makeup smeared, her expensive clothes rumpled. When she saw me, she stood up, and her voice echoed through the hallway. You did this! You pushed him until he broke. If my husband dies, his blood is on your hands. A nurse rushed over to quiet her down. The police separated us, asked their questions, took their notes. Eventually, a doctor came out to tell us Darnell was stable, but had suffered a severe concussion. He'd crashed his car into a light pole 3 blocks from my house. The gun had been in his lap. They were going to keep him for observation, and then he'd likely face charges for weapons possession and reckless driving. I sat in that hospital waiting room until they let me see him. He was awake, bandages around his head, his eyes hollow. When he saw me, he turned away. Darnell, I said, go away. What were you doing with a gun? What do you think? You took everything from me. My job, my wife's business, our reputation. I've got nothing left. What did you expect me to do? Not this, never this. He laughed, bitter and broken. You wanted to teach me a lesson, right? Well, lesson learned. You're more powerful than me. You win. Now get out! I left the hospital feeling like I'd won a war but lost my soul. By the time I got home, the sun was coming up, and I realized I was an old man who'd sacrificed his family on the altar of being right. 3 days later, Darnell was arrested and charged with weapons violations. His lawyer said he was looking at prison time. Darnell took a plea deal. 3 years in prison for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reduced from 5 because it was his first offense, and his lawyer argued he was having a mental health crisis. Tamika filed for divorce 2 months after he went in. Took the house, took the cars, took DeAndre, and moved to Charlotte to be near her parents. I tried to visit my grandson before they left, stood outside their gated community, called Tamika's phone until she blocked my number. The last time I saw DeAndre was through a car window as they drove past me. He was 6 years old, looking at me like I was a stranger. That was year 1. Year 2, I threw myself into the business, expanded into 2 more states, acquired a competitor, increased revenue by 40%. Made more money than I'd ever made. Came home to an empty house every night and ate microwaved dinners in front of the television. Jerome stopped by on Sundays, but even he didn't know what to say anymore. I wrote letters to Darnell, sent them certified mail to the prison. Never got a response. Sister Beatrice passed away that year. Heart attack during Sunday service, died before the ambulance arrived. At her funeral, folks talked about how she'd lived a full life surrounded by people who loved her. I sat in the back pew and thought about how I'd die alone in my big empty house with my big successful company and nobody to leave it to. Year 3 started with a headache that wouldn't quit. Then my left arm went numb while I was signing contracts. My secretary called 911. I woke up in the hospital with a doctor telling me I'd had a stroke. Moderate damage. I'd need physical therapy, occupational therapy, probably home care for a while. Do you have family who can help? The doctor asked. I thought about Darnell in prison, thought about DeAndre in Charlotte, probably forgetting what I looked like. Thought about Dolores in the ground, and how disappointed she'd be if she could see what I'd done to our family. No, I said. No family. But lying in that hospital bed, unable to move my left side properly, watching nurses do everything for me because I couldn't do it myself, something shifted. I'd spent 3 years teaching my son a lesson about pride and hard work and consequences. Now I was learning my own lesson about what happens when you win every battle but lose the war. I called my attorney from the hospital. Veronica, I need you to do something. Contact Darnell's lawyer. Tell them I want to petition for early release. I'll sponsor him, provide employment, housing, everything the parole board needs to see. Neil, are you sure? After everything? I'm dying, Veronica. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but that stroke was a warning. I can't die like this, with my son in prison and my grandson thinking I'm a monster. I need to fix this while I still can. The petition took 4 months. Darnell was released on parole with strict conditions. He had to live with me, work for me, check in with his parole officer weekly, stay clean, stay out of trouble. One mistake, and he'd go back to finish his sentence. The day he came home, I was in my wheelchair in the living room. Physical therapy had helped, but I still couldn't walk without assistance, couldn't dress myself completely. Needed help with basic things that used to be automatic. Darnell walked through the door carrying a small duffel bag with everything he owned. He'd lost weight in prison, had new scars on his hands, grey in his hair that hadn't been there before. He was 39 years old and looked 50. We stared at each other for a long moment. "Thank you for doing this," he finally said. "My lawyer said you didn't have to. Sit down, son." He sat on the same couch where we'd had our last real conversation, before everything went to hell. Before I pulled his contract and destroyed his life. Before he showed up at my door with a gun. "I need to know something," I said. "That night you crashed. Were you coming to hurt me?" Darnell looked at his hands, at those new scars. "I don't know. I'd been drinking, lost my job, lost Tamika, lost everything. I was so angry. Bought the gun because I felt powerless, and having it made me feel like I had some control. But I don't think I could have, actually. I don't know what I was going to do, Dad. I just knew I couldn't live with what my life had become. I pushed you to that point. You didn't pull the trigger. That was me. Prison taught me that much. Own your choices." He looked up at me. "But yeah, you pushed. You could have just said no to the loan and left it at that. Instead, you destroyed everything. Why?" I'd asked myself that question 1,000 times. "Because you put your hands on me. Because Tamika disrespected me in my own house. Because I was tired of you all treating me like I was nothing. We didn't know who you really were. You should have treated me with respect anyway, whether I had money or not." He nodded slowly. "You're right. We were wrong. I was wrong. I let Tamika's ambition turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Let her family's judgment make me ashamed of where I came from. I'm sorry, Dad. For all of it." It was the apology I'd been waiting for, but sitting there in my wheelchair, unable to feed myself properly, knowing my grandson was being raised by people who'd taught him to look down on folks like me, it felt hollow. "Here's how this is going to work," I said. "You're going to be my caregiver. Help me with daily tasks, drive me to appointments, cook, clean, all of it. I'm also giving you a job at the warehouse, real warehouse work, not management. Loading, unloading, inventory. Minimum wage to start. Okay? And every week we're going to talk, really talk, about what happened, about why it happened, about how we fix it." I'd like that. The first month was hard. Darnell had to help me shower, dress, use the bathroom. Had to watch me struggle with basic tasks while my body slowly relearned what it used to know. I could see the shame in his eyes sometimes, and I didn't know if it was shame for what he'd done or shame at seeing his father reduced to this. He worked at the warehouse from 6 to 2, then came home to take care of me, cooked dinner, helped me with exercises, watched television with me in the evenings. We didn't talk much at first. The silence between us was still too heavy with everything we'd done to each other. But slowly, we found our rhythm. He started telling me about prison, about the men he'd met, the things he'd learned about himself. I started telling him about the business, about how I'd built it, about the choices I'd made, and the things I regretted. "Mama knew about all of it?" he asked one night. "Every bit. She was my partner in everything. Did she agree with keeping it from me?" It was her idea, actually. She said money changes people, and she wanted to know you'd love us whether we had it or not. "I always loved you, Dad, even when I was being stupid." 6 months in, I got a letter from Tamika. She wanted to bring DeAndre to visit, said he'd been asking about his grandfather and his father, said maybe it was time to let some of the poison out of this situation. They came on a Saturday. DeAndre was 7 now, taller, more serious. He looked at Darnell with curiosity and at me with uncertainty. Tamika stayed for an hour, watched us interact, and then took DeAndre home. But she came back the next weekend, and the one after that. Darnell and I both noticed she looked different. Tired, less polished, less sure of herself. On the 3rd visit, after DeAndre went outside to play, she sat down across from me. "I need to tell you something." Both of you." Darnell came in from the kitchen, sensing the shift in her tone. "I'm broke," Tamika said simply. "The divorce settlement didn't go as planned. My parents cut me off when I left Darnell. Said I'd made my bed." "The consulting business fell apart completely after the IRS audit. I've been working as a receptionist for 6 months, barely making rent." "Why are you telling us this?" Darnell asked. "Because I was wrong. About everything. About what mattered. About how to build a life. About what makes someone worth respect." She looked at me. "You were wearing work boots and driving an old truck because you didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I was wearing designer clothes and driving a Lexus because I needed everyone to think I was more than I was. And when it all fell apart, I had nothing real underneath." She started crying then, real tears that smeared her drugstore makeup. "I'm so sorry. For how I treated you, for what I encouraged Darnell to do. For all of it. I was so focused on status and appearances that I turned us into people who assaulted an elderly man in his own home. That's not who I was raised to be." I looked at this woman who'd helped bring my family to its knees, who was now sitting in my living room, admitting she'd been wrong. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. "DeAndre," I said. "How's he doing?" "He's confused. Asks why his daddy was gone, why we don't live in the big house anymore, why Grandpa Neil doesn't come around. I don't know what to tell him." "Tell him the truth," Darnell said. "Tell him his parents made mistakes, and his grandpa made mistakes, and we're all trying to do better." Over the next few months, Tamika started bringing DeAndre more regularly. She and Darnell talked, carefully at first, then with more openness. They weren't getting back together, too much damage for that, but they were figuring out how to co-parent, how to be civil, how to put their son first. My physical therapy continued. I graduated from the wheelchair to a walker, then to a cane. Regained most of my function, though my left hand still didn't work quite right. Darnell was promoted at the warehouse, not because he was my son, but because he'd become the hardest worker they had. One evening, about a year after he'd come home, we were sitting on the back porch, the same porch where Jerome had asked me if destroying my son was worth it. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why did you really bring me home? Was it guilt? Pity? Some final lesson you wanted to teach?" I thought about that for a long time. All of the above, maybe. But mostly because I was dying alone in a big house with all my success around me, and I realized I'd won every battle except the one that mattered. I'd rather die with my son close by, even if things aren't perfect, than die surrounded by money and nobody to share it with. "Things aren't perfect," Darnell agreed, "but they're better than they were." "Yeah, they are." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. Somewhere in Charlotte, my grandson was probably doing homework or playing video games. Somewhere in the city, Tamika was working her receptionist job and rebuilding her life from scratch. Somewhere in my bank account, there was more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. None of it felt like victory. The real twist came 2 weeks later, during a routine follow-up with my neurologist. I'd been having headaches again, moments of confusion. The doctor ordered new scans. "Mr. Washington, I need to be straight with you. You've got a brain tumor. It's inoperable, given its location and your age. We can treat it, slow it down, but we're looking at maybe 18 months, 2 years if we're lucky." I sat in that office, hearing the words but not quite processing them. All this time, I'd thought the stroke was my wake-up call. Turned out it was just the opening act. "Does my son need to know?" I asked. "That's your choice. But if he's your primary caregiver, he'll need to prepare for what's coming." That evening, I told Darnell everything. Watched his face crumble. Watched him try to hold it together. Watched him fail. He cried like he hadn't cried since his mother's funeral. and I held him the way I used to when he was small and had nightmares. "I just got you back," he said. "We just started fixing things." "I know, son. I know." "What do? We do what we've been doing. We show up. We try. We make the time. We have count." The final irony hit me later that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I'd spent 3 years teaching my son about consequences, about how actions have prices, about how you can't put your hands on someone and walk away clean. I'd stripped him of everything, sent him to prison, forced him to rebuild from nothing. And now, just when we were finding our way back to each other, I was the one running out of time. All that money, all that power, all those lessons about accountability and hard work. None of it could save me. The universe was teaching me my own lesson about consequences, and this one I couldn't control my way out of. Darnell moved into my house permanently after the diagnosis. We spent my remaining time doing simple things, watching football games, cooking Sunday dinner together, playing with DeAndre when Tamika brought him by, building photo albums and telling stories about Dolores, making sure my grandson knew where he came from. Jerome visited every week, and finally I introduced him to Darnell as my operations manager, showed them both the full scope of what I'd built. "When I'm gone," I told Darnell, "this all goes to you. The business, the money, everything. But there's a condition." "What condition?" "You keep working. Not because you have to, but because work gives life meaning. You take care of the people who work for you, the way I tried to. You remember where you came from. And you teach your son that being rich is easy, but being good is hard." "I will, Dad. I promise." 6 months before I died, Tamika asked if she could come to Sunday dinner regularly. She'd met someone, she said, a school teacher who drove a Honda and wore off-brand clothes and made her laugh. She seemed lighter somehow, less burdened by the weight of appearances. "I learned something," she told me one evening. "Everything I thought mattered, the money, the status, the image, it was all just noise. What matters is sitting around a table with people who show up even when things are hard. That's wealth I never understood." 3 months before the end, Darnell asked if I had any regrets. "Just one," I said. "I wish I'd found a way to teach you without breaking you first. There had to be a path between letting you walk all over me and destroying your life. I was so focused on being right that I forgot to be merciful." "You brought me home," he said. "That was mercy. I brought you home because I was dying and scared of being alone. That's not mercy, that's selfishness dressed up as grace. Then we're both selfish, because I came home not just to take care of you, but because prison taught me I didn't know how to live, and I needed you to teach me. In the end, that's what we did. Taught each other. Him showing me how to accept help, how to be vulnerable, how to let someone love you even when you're broken. Me showing him how to work with dignity, how to build something real, how to be a father even when you feel like a failure. I died on a Tuesday morning in March, in my own bed, with Darnell holding my hand. My last thought was that I'd spent 40 years building an empire, 3 years tearing my family apart, and 2 years trying to put it back together. The empire would continue without me. But the family, that fragile, imperfect, wounded family, that was the only thing I'd built that really mattered, and I'd almost destroyed it trying to prove a point. The lesson I'd meant to teach my son about respect and consequences ended up teaching me something else. That being powerful doesn't make you right, and being right doesn't make you wise. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is forgive. Sometimes the hardest lesson to learn is your own. Darnell runs Washington Logistics Group now, still works at the warehouse 1 day a week, loading trucks alongside people who don't know he's the owner. DeAndre comes to visit every summer, learning the business from the ground up, the way his father should have. Tamika married her school teacher and found peace in a smaller, quieter life. And me? I'm in the ground next to Dolores, hoping she understands why I did what I did, and hoping even more that she's proud of how Darnell turned out, despite it all. Justice, I learned too late, isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about restoration. And sometimes the person who needs to learn the lesson most is the one doing the teaching. That's the end of this story. If it touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe. Have you experienced something similar? Share your story in the comments below.